So...
Wait.
Yeah.
First, we have to do some commercials. Product placement, right? South USA. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.
Starbucks for people who need
Caribou.
the Go Juice. Whoops, Caribou. Wow, it's embarrassing. It's right there. There's even the Caribou right there.
It's
okay.
funny, I just picked it up here in town and we don't have a Starbucks. I drove to Bemidji, all the way to Bemidji this morning just to get your coffee.
Starbucks for people who like Caribou. Anyway,
oh dear.
Wow. So I shouldn't do commercials because
No.
that would be amazing.
Yeah. All right. So let's. All right. So.
Back
So
to
yeah.
C.S. Lewis.
So yes, Prince Caspian.
Yeah.
So I know. So what do you think about the book? Like, do you have favorite parts of it, or?
Favorite parts. One of my favorite parts now. I never really talk up the movies, but of course the movie starts with the kids at Cathedral Cove, and we watched this movie recently with our kids, and it was just amazing to see Cathedral Cove after having been there.
Yeah.
That part is cool now.
Yeah,
but
he
that
likes
whole
to brag about where he's gone. It's kind of annoying. Okay.
Yeah, I do.
You make me
totally.
jealous.
I have started so many stories over the years with when we were in New Zealand, and it's always like you can just feel somebody over there like cocking their fist. Pow! But anyway, yeah, that brought back good memories, is I guess all I'm saying, of just hanging out there. But that whole sequence, in the book, it's the coming to realization. Like, it takes a long time. In the movie, it happens like that. In the book, it takes a long time for them to wander through the ruins of Cair Paravel and come to finally be like, this is Cair Paravel. How many hundreds of years have passed for this to lie in ruins now? And so, yeah, there's kind of a rude comeuppance, I guess, as the book starts. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I was going to say one thing I think about the movie, and I mean, yeah, I have this similar issues with how they did Prince Caspian. But I think maybe, I don't know, I'm wondering if they don't really address, like, how, like in the book, like, they had dug a channel and made it an island. They just done a lot more, like, the landscape seemed like it had changed more, but they're, like, on a beach that they had probably played on or whatever, and they're looking up. It's like, I don't know. To me, it's more unique looking, so maybe they recognized it. That could be me. It could be. But yeah, I do like C.S. Lewis kind of likes to build the anticipation. They find out slowly, and I mean, maybe the reader kind of has a premonition about where they are, but C.S. Lewis. I mean, but the kids don't.
Yeah, the kids don't, and I mean, how weird it would be to have a year pass in your real life and to have hundreds of years go by in this other world at the same time. Like the thought that you could have simultaneous time schemes that are not moving at the same pace is just, it's a little bit mind-numbing. We don't do very well with time in general, and like, God is timelessly in the past, timelessly in the future.
He knows exactly what's going to happen already.
All of that stuff is a bit mind-boggling, in the same way that when I study the stars and planets, the numbers are just too big to even compute in the brain. When you say 23 million light years or something like that, or when you talk about, it takes 640 years for the light from this star to reach Earth, it's hard for that to really compute. In the same way, I think the Pevensey kids, when they enter the book, are like, what? 400 years has gone by in one, orbit of the sun?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Do we know how long it's been?
Maybe it's not 400, but it's hundreds anyway.
Yeah.
I think they do say 400 later on at some point. But.
When I think of the movie, I just think of the movie where it's been like 1,000 years or something, or whatever, how long it's been.
Yeah, but it's been ages and ages, yeah.
Yeah, and but yeah, and I do think one of my favorite parts of the series or parts of the book is, I think, Lucy's faith and Lucy's unwavering, like, she knows what she believes or whatever. It's just never wavered. It's just on display so beautifully in this book too. Yeah.
Yeah, she's just kind of eternally hopeful, eternally good. You know, it seems like I'm sure she gets kind of cross, as C.S. Lewis would write it, most definitely, with her siblings at times. But she is just so solid. Her faith is solid. Her kindness is consistent. And yeah, you really see it in this book. So some of my well, just the things I appreciate about this book. Obviously, the scene where she sees Aslan and then he disappears, and everybody else gets the opportunity to basically they're not. It's not about their faith in Aslan even as much as it's about their faith in Lucy, and you see the reversal of roles here. They go around and vote, and of course Trumpkin is, he's like, no, I'm not going to go down into the ravine. I think you're making all this up. But for the two older kids to vote against Lucy when they were the ones who really voted for her in The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, after Professor Kirk talks to them about, schools these days, they don't teach logic and all this stuff. So
one of the greatest scenes of all time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real role reversal, and Lewis really starts to cast Edmund more and more in the light of a protagonist, of a person who has changed, truly, for him to be the one that sides with her. So,
yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, I do like that too. I like how, that's one thing I like about the movie. Like we'll probably talk eventually about how I don't like what they did with Peter. I hate what they did with him. And but I like what they did with Edmund. They really show like the contrast from being like this kind of a punk kid. And granted, I mean, I know one of my friends, we were watching the movies together or something, and she said, when I watched the first movie, I thought Peter, or his actor, was just one of the cutest guys I've ever seen, but then I fell in love with Edmund in the second movie or something like that.
Yeah.
But this is my girly side coming up, and he's very...
Yes, it is.
I'll stop. But anyway,
back to reality.
Yeah, anyway, so, whatever, but I love what they do with, you see the contrasting between them, and again, like you said, the role reversal, Edmund's the one, and I think he just says, in the movie, the last time I didn't believe Lucy, I ended up looking pretty stupid, or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's just saying, he chooses to trust her because he realized, or he uses the logic in the book. He just says, when we first discovered Narnia, Lucy discovered it first, none of us would believe her, but she was right after all. Does it make sense to believe her this time, or wouldn't it be fair to believe her?
Yeah.
So, I just love that whole...
I think, it points out so clearly, as does the eventual falling away of Susan, like, you can be very solid, very on track, and, slowly over time veer off into sort of pride and arrogance. You can also start in a place of pride and arrogance at some point, and through the changing and working of the Lord in your life, you can veer into humility and into a much better place of submission to Him. So I think those, Lewis having those characters move in opposite sort of directions. I mean, you really have Edmund over here in the beginning and Susan over here, and they basically cross, and Susan ends up lost, and Edmund ends up one of the most solid characters. So it's very, it's complex character development, and it is how life works. Mm-hmm. So to me, one of the most appealing things about the book is Caspian, and he's got his nanny, who ends up being a Narnian. He's got his tutor, who's half dwarf.
I love Dr. Cornelius.
Cornelius is one of the best characters in the book. I love Trumpkin, I love Truffle Hunter, both of them. But this whole scene where Cornelius, who's been teaching Caspian about the old ways for years or whatever, however long it's been, he comes to him in the middle of the night and says, "Get up, the king has had a son, your life is in danger, let's go." And they go up. There's so much that appeals to a young boy, for sure. I guess I can't speak for young girls, but to a young boy, in the thought that you get awoken in the night, hurriedly dress, you go up to this
Right.
parapet, tower.
Or even when he's like telling him the stories, like how that's how
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
All of that, and for there to be a whisper of there's a reality to talking beasts and the old ways and the magic that used to exist in the woods and in Narnian fabric and fiber and the very whatever essence of the place, and then to go up to some tower in the middle of the night and is that where they how does he eventually get out of the castle in Prince Caspian?
I think what it does,
They just go to some tower that's unused and then
I think what it is,
depart.
what it was is they went to, because they go to the Great Tower, and like, I think that starts because he goes up there the first time to look at Tarver and Ellenville,
the stars,
stars. Which, by the way, people were saying that Jupiter and Saturn are getting really close to each other right now, or something. And they
like
said,
right now in
our world, right?
Our world, yeah.
Right, yeah, literally, whatever. And they said, and I've been hearing like Narnia fans saying, this is like Prince Caspian, I've been watching her, or whatever. It's kind of funny, but anyway, so kind of interesting. But anyway, so, and Caspian's up there, and he's just saying like, or no, they're both up there. He's like, well, it's kind of a pity the tree's blocking our way because we could see better from the West Tower. And then he's like, well, actually, I brought you here to tell you about old Narnia or whatever, because no one will hear us because they're like because I think they were like way up. They were way up above the castle, and then
many floors
and they were
above people. Yeah.
And then they were below unused room. Then below the tower was unused rooms. Or
so that's just where they go to talk.
And then.
But then when he actually leaves the castle,
he's up there too. And then they just go down to the bottom. Like the door was unlocked. The door that went outside was unlocked, and either Cornelius or someone who had, like someone else who was on Caspian's side was. Helping with that.
Yeah, I'm probably mixing up a little bit the scene in The Silver Chair where they fly away on the owls, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, this notion that like there's this secret society out there of true Narnians, and Caspian rides off into the woods, unlike any person of his ilk. They shy away from the woods, and then he finds them inadvertently, but he finds them. I don't know. There's just something. There's something so appealing about all of that. The castles and the talking beasts and the just all the magical airs to everything. Lewis does a great job of writing. I think for all young people, but for young boys especially, there's so much of courage and valor and battle and castles and horses and all this stuff that really connects with young boys. So.
Yeah, it's really cool. And.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I said, we can talk about, if you want to talk about Trumpkin for a few minutes. I mean, Trumpkin is he's probably one of my favorite characters in Narnia, period. Or like non-human characters, because he's funny and he's such a good character too. And
yeah, he is. He's loyal to the core.
Yeah.
He's got an innate sort of sense of goodness of what's right, unlike Nickabrick. Nickabrick is just he has sort of approach to life like, I will do whatever is the most convenient for me. If that means I have to align myself with Aslan because he's going to bring the most good for me personally, okay. But if he's not going to come through in the clutch, I'll do whatever it takes, man. And Trumpkin, you never have that. You just, like, he knows good from evil. He knows that siding with a witch and a werewolf or whatever is just not the way to bring about. Sure, you might get what you want in the short run, but in the long run, you're going to get burned big time. So Trumpkin he's a great character. He's stubborn. He's he's filled with disbelief, right? But there's been hundreds of years. I don't know why I have this 400-year time period stuck in my head.
Yeah.
But
maybe you're thinking of the 400 years of silence or something.
Well, I'm gonna have to go back to this book and look. But I always thought it was a direct thing that Lewis did to tie the two together, because you have not only the 400 years of silence at the end of the Old Testament, you have the 400 years of captivity and slavery in Genesis.
Interesting.
So I always thought it was deliberate that he did that.
Maybe he did. I could be wrong.
Maybe I'm off my rocker.
See, I haven't read the book in a while. I've been listening. I mean,
yeah, but you listen, or you know the details of the books a lot better than I do.
Yeah.
So,
but I could just be forgetting stuff.
If you're saying I don't recall that, then.
A lot of what I remember is from the audio dramas, and like I said,
Sure.
they didn't include the "even a traitor may mend." I've known one that did line from The Horse and His Boy. So
let's just take a moment of silence to remember the audio drama and its sweet death. You missed that line, and it's just you can't be trusted, right? I mean,
wow. I mean,
no,
I'll still listen to it, but I mean,
don't know if we need to go that far,
but you know, I mean, so maybe that's in there and it just isn't there because I mean they I don't know. I mean, there's some details. It's one thing to gloss over, but I do think they shouldn't have glossed over the.
There's a few you can't miss.
Yeah.
But, so you have Miraz, a leader who probably exhibits some of the pomp and self-centeredness of a few of the presidents that we've seen in our own country over the last many years. You know, and he is very willing to allow himself to be flattered.
Yeah, that whole scene.
And that kind of comes to be his downfall in the end, really. You know, also the way he treats the people around him, which they just get fed up with. But
yeah, I know one thing that's interesting too. You know, he's kind of like the dictator or whatever, but when the Narnians and Caspian are in Aslan's house, and they're like in the woods or whatever, and that's actually they put a mound over the stone table, right? I think that's how it is. And then sorry, I'm losing my head. And then they're like camping on the side of the woods, like the Telmarines, and they said, well, the Telmarines were afraid of going into the woods, but they were even more afraid of Miraz or something like that. So they're like, they don't want to, but then there's still that that fear built in or whatever of.
Yeah, and I think it just is. It's a testament to like any dictator that there's been in real life, and I think the pomp and the arrogance looks very much like presidents we've had in the past, but we've never had a president that, you know, like you think of dictators in our world and how they,
like
you
Hitler
know,
or
sure,
Stalin
or Castro or Hugo Chavez, or I mean those are more recent people. There's just always a moment where the tables turn. There's always a moment where the people get fed up. There's always a moment where something happens and they fall precipitously and quickly from power. And that's what we see with Miraz. He has everybody under his thumb. He literally dictates to everyone exactly how things are going to be. And then these two lords, you know, are like, this guy's, he doesn't care about anybody. He's corrupt, and he's cruel. And we're sick of it, you know. So they kind of orchestrate his end, right?
Yeah.
And then their own end is orchestrated, or at least one of them dies in the battle, right?
Yeah, I think only. I don't know.
I think the other one lives, but yeah.
I think Gazelle, or however you say his name. I think he had lived because I think he's in the last scene where they all go back.
Yeah. So Caspian gets his head removed from his shoulders, right?
Yeah, because I remember, like, they gloss. That's one of the things I don't mind that they gloss over in the audio drama. They said Peter slashed his legs from under him, and with the back cut of the same stroke, like hit him in the head. It's like in the book, it's like, no, he actually like severed his head.
That's quite a shum feet head. See you later.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is kind of the one with the ick factor, but that's okay.
Again, very appealing to younger boys. I mean,
yeah.
It's like, whoa, nice.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I mean, I don't know.
But,
I like medieval fighting as much as the next person, but still sometimes.
But the reality of it would not have been pretty.
Yeah.
So yeah. So what are your thoughts on the ending of Prince Caspian?
Like.
And how everything sort of resolves, and how Aslan shows up with this, you know.
I think it's. Yeah, there's so much I love about that. It's really true. I mean, this is one thing I will say about the book, how they portrayed no, not the book, the movie they changed that I liked. That's me, whatever. Most of it, like how they changed Peter, how they changed the sequence, not necessarily, but one thing that I really liked was how they show that, well, maybe they didn't do this on purpose, but they showed that man's attempts are futile unless Jesus is in the picture. Because they're trying to win, they're doing all this stuff, and Peter actually says, I think we've waited for Aslan long enough. He's losing faith. He's putting his confidence in his flesh and his own abilities.
Exactly.
And when they go to the raid on the castle, they lose the majority of the soldiers that they took with him. And I mean, part of that was Caspian. I mean, it was him and Peter and Caspian together. Like, their mistakes made worked in against them. But I just think it's so true how, we can. And Lucy says, you're all acting like there's only two options, dying here or dying there, but did you forget who really defeated the White Witch? And I think we can just say, we can get all caught up and we gotta do this and we gotta do. I actually saw, I try not to get political, but I actually saw like a picture of that right after, I think it was during the week when.
She's getting political.
Drink some more Starbucks. When there was still the disputed election or something like that, and they were saying, and it was Lucy saying, you're all acting like there's only two options, Biden or Trump, but have you forgotten that Jesus Christ is our king or something like that? And I'm like, okay, now that's such a, whatever. And
something I can get behind.
Yeah, they're so easy to get caught up in, all this all these actions of man or whatever. And in the book they talk about this a little bit. I mean, except Caspian was actively trying to
I think Lewis did a fantastic job in, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe battle sequence at the end, and in Prince Caspian. The movie does their own thing to show this, but in the book it's very clear that this is a ultimately losing sort of attempt until Aslan shows up. And when he shows up, ain't nobody has to do anything. I mean, it's just over. It's just Aslan uses the force of the river and it's over. Kind of like the Israelites crossing into the Promised Land or crossing the Red Sea. Like, here comes the Pharaoh and his chariots, and then what does God do? He moves the pillar around to block him, and then he opens a way. And it's exactly like that. Like, here comes Aslan with this whole retinue of people that he's freed from, the tyranny of their lives. And there's pandemonium. I think that's one thing we don't think about in terms of heaven. There is going to be, I think, a certain level of pandemonium that happens because, by the way, one of my favorite words on earth, pandemonium, what a great word.
It's a good word.
But, you see the raucous, joyful parade of followers of Aslan. Like, yes, the king is back, and it is time to celebrate. So
I know. Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
One thing about that I think is cool. Even like Lucy, when she's trying to wake the trees and she's saying all these things like, come out, come talk to me, or come to me, wake up. And it doesn't do any, well, I think they kind of start to wake up, or she's not sure if it's just the wind or whatever it is. But then Aslan comes and he basically says, like, well, he roars, which is like the one word, basically one word, and they're all awake instantly.
Exactly. And again, the power of man, or woman in this case, versus the power of Aslan.
Yeah, and I think true.
Power of God.
And I love like how we see something like we don't see because we don't really see in, we see in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, like how he can breathe on statues and they come back to life. But I love how when they're like, I think they're like going through and they're like gathering actual humans, I think, right?
Yeah.
And
Prince Caspian.
Yeah, Prince Caspian. And like this woman this girl is like crying outside of her house, and Aslan just says, "Why are you crying, my lamb?" And I just think, this is such a parallel of like the tenderness of Jesus, and then how he's gonna go in and heal her or something, and then he actually just like lifts the house up and like throws it. And I just think it's so beautiful. It's another parallel. Like, I just see so many parallels like the tenderness of Jesus.
The tenderness and power simultaneously that was cohabitated in Jesus and still does. the tenderness to say that and then to go and whoop up in battle. Like this is quite a guy, you know.
Yeah.
I think the verse that comes to mind when you talk about this whole thing, the power of man, and really how there is none. There's the power of God, and it's just a word, it's a breath, it's a roar, it's a whatever, and it's all over. The verse, is it Psalm 110 or Psalm 127? It's one of those where it says, unless the Lord builds the house, the laborers labor in vain. And I mean, how many times have you seen that in your own life? Lewis does a great job of portraying that in the books. The Last Battle is all about that. Like, here's this ridiculous situation where anybody should be able to see through it, but what resolves it all? Nothing but him.
Yeah.
It has to be him. And so, my absolute favorite part of the movie is you have the whole, I think it's Glozell leading the troops of Mraz to the bridge.
I know what you're talking about.
They get to the bridge and they start to cross the bridge over the Fords of Bermuda. And then Lucy just walks out onto the bridge and stands there and looks at him. She takes this wimpy little dagger out and she's like, and she her face and the patheticness of like her and her dagger and like, whoa. And it's just like she's taunting them, you know, because she knows what's behind her.
Yes.
And again, that's, I think, a good position. It's a beautiful picture. Her on the bridge with just kind of this like wry smile, like, I know a secret you don't know. That's what it feels like. And then all the power of heaven is behind her. You know, and
and he just, I think he just roars and like the bridge blows up or something like that.
You know, the water just sweeps them all away. And that picture is kind of burned into my mind. This little girl just going out onto the bridge. And, oh, don't mind me. I'll just take on the entire army of the Telmarines. Brilliant decision by Andrew Adamson. Is that his name?
That's his name. So, I mean, there are some things about the movie that I like. It's just, I think what they did, honestly, like I keep coming back to what they did with Peter, like, just messed up.
Basically unforgivable. But.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I think they had their reasons, like saying, well, you know.
They have to make things more exciting, you know.
Yeah.
Movies always do that to books. That's why they add scenes like the castle raid, which never happens, and all that stuff. It's more exciting.
Well, that itself didn't bother me, like the castle raid. It was fine, and I mean, I actually kind of liked, because the book, like, doesn't have a lot of action to be. I mean, it has some action, but
and that's what a director is going, oh man, we gotta beef this up. People aren't gonna want to watch this.
Yeah, like, I mean, it would be really
walking
honestly
through the woods.
Yeah, or Lucy or Trumpkin sitting for how long and telling them the whole story. It made more sense to show it like not in flashback. As much as I like flashback sequences, I mean they can be kind of weird sometimes. So I was okay with that. I just think that again, you know, it's kind of
adding scenes like that. Sorry to cut in. Adding scenes like that is no big deal. Changing the character of the characters is a big deal.
Well, like, and
that would be a wrestling match too, I'm sure.
And the thing though, like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the first movie, they did they added some stuff. Like they added the Frozen River sequence, which I think was just splendid. But they used it to like enhance the characters. Mm-hmm. You know, it wasn't just like whatever. And I mean, I think that like they changed the character that they had built, because they did like they just kind of built up the characters in some ways. Like they didn't change the heart of the characters from the book. And again, I don't know, maybe it's a weird thing to like not having brothers and sisters, like seeing the sibling dynamic is just, I enjoy that, and I thought it was done really well. And the actors acted, you know, they cast it brilliantly, but again, I just think that they kind of screw it up. Like, you know how like one bad like question on a test or something like that, like if you only have 7 questions or something like that, getting one answer wrong is going to bring your grade way down or something like that. I think that's kind of what they did, because they made a really big mistake or whatever. And I mean, again, they had their reasons. I just think that I don't think they did the right thing with his character or something like that.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, just kind of to to wrap up the whole thing, when I think about the book, all the characters, some brilliant characters. Caspian's a great character.
Yeah.
He has a lot of valor. He's, it's right back to Cars.
Yeah,
With
you got
Hudson
the
Horn.
stuff, kid, or whatever.
You got a lot of stuff, kid. And Trumpkin's that way, and Truffle Hunter is that way. Reepicheep is that way. We're introduced to all these people in this book that, there's a level of loyalty in them to something that they have never seen in their lifetime. I think of Truffle Hunter and Reepicheep as people kind of like Zechariah and Elizabeth, or Simeon and Anna in the temple. People who, through centuries of silence, have not seen the evidence of Aslan or anything remotely like the grandeur of the Golden Age, in centuries, and they are just as eager, just filled with just as much anticipation as anybody could hope. That is a beautiful spiritual lesson from that book. Just like what you're saying, which is maybe the most important spiritual lesson from that book, which is, unless God builds the house, unless Aslan is with you in battle, you fight in vain, you labor in vain. You ain't going to accomplish nothing outside of his purposes. And if he's not with you, nothing else matters. It's like that Anglican prayer. Come, Holy Ghost, our souls inspire and lighten us with celestial fire, for if you are with us, nothing else matters. And if you are not with us, nothing else matters. That really comes through loud and clear in Prince Caspian, and I love that about the book. So,
yeah. And I think, Reepicheep is another one of my favorite characters, too. I mean,
great character.
I literally named a cat after him. One of my cats after him, so obviously
naming a cat after a mouse.
I know.
That's bold.
I know. I always saw the irony of it.
But he is he's so honorable. He's so loyal. He's so courageous.
Yeah.
I mean, you love all this stuff, but he's obsessed with himself too much.
I know. That's
he's
what I was
obsessed with
too.
honor too much, and he has to be taken down a peg.
Yeah.
By Aslan, like he even says that to him.
Yeah, that's what he says. Like, no, like because he gets his tail cut off, and he gets, and either Lucy, I think they said either Lucy had forgotten it, or her cordial couldn't heal it, or something like that.
Yeah.
And Aslan he's like, asking for his tail back or something, and Aslan is like, well, why do you need a tail so badly? And it all comes back to he has some vanity issues.
He's vain, right?
He's vain.
Yeah, and he says to him, I think you are too obsessed with your honor, basically, like,
You're offended by honor.
But Aslan says something to him like that, like, friend, you are too concerned with your honor. The problem with that is it's all tied up in pride. And if you're too concerned with your honor, and it's like, you've offended me, sir, here's my glove, I will slap you and see you at dawn with a pistol, I mean, like, that's how people used to be. Alexander Hamilton died because Aaron Burr insulted his wife or whatever, and then they have to duel it out. Well, somebody dies in a duel a lot of the time. So it's just that kind of honor culture can really lead to a lot of negative things, because a person just can't be offended. They won't be offended, and then they just live in offense. And the only way to take care of that is to draw your sword. We will settle this once and for all. I mean, come on, just have some humility in your life.
And I love how Aslan finally tells Reepicheep, because the other mice are gonna cut off their own tails, because they're not gonna be ashamed to letting the high mouse not be as good as them or something. Yeah. And Aslan says, well, then I'll give you your tail back, because not because of your dignity or your vanity, but because of how much your people love you, or something like that.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, I like the scene, but I just like what it conveys to the reader. Like, when you become obsessed with your own vanity, with your own honor, nothing good comes of that, because that's putting pride on too high a pedestal in your life. So.
And then we also find out that it was the Reepicheep's ancestors or something that had cut the cords around Aslan, and it sounds like that's when they started talking. Am I right about that?
I don't know if that's true, but very well could be, if that's when mice are granted the honor of talking.
Yeah, but it's such a wonderful.
Yeah.
I know. I think I remember like asking my mom or something like when I was a little kid, like so when I was younger, so like, what she think if she thought like these battles are supposed to represent something specific or whatever, like the allegorical qualities. And I mean, I think of course besides the obvious like unless the Lord builds a house, the laborers labor in vain. But also I think I don't know, maybe the ongoing battle between good and evil, the spiritual warfare, or I don't know if there's any similarity. If it's just one of those, I mean, I think there is a level of of course there's biblical qualities, but I'm not like everything doesn't mean something.
We don't take up swords right now yet, or guns in our case, and fight wars right now. But yeah, every day we're invited to put on the armor of God and fight.
Yeah.
And Christians not doing that, it kind of comes right back to this idea that all that's necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. So that's something as Christians we have to keep in mind. When good men and women do nothing, when they don't get on their knees and pray, evil flourishes, and we are called to war, even if we don't have literal armor and sword. So anyway, but we war in a different way. So I think the final scene of the book is great. He starts and ends books really well, oftentimes, and I love, Edmund saying, rats, I've left my new torch in Narnia, and just the thought that physical matter could be left in this other realm,
And that's one thing they do in the movie. Crazy. His torch shows up again, because Caspian's like, I saved this for you, and like throws it to him or something like that. It's kind of funny, but I don't know. That's what I like that aspect of, like how... Yeah. That's what I'm sure it was irony, but that's what he chooses to say after, like, they've just come back from this adventure.
That's what he has to say about it.
Like, oh, father, I've left my new torch in Narnia.
Yeah. It's good. I like that levity that C.S. Lewis had such a great quality of cheekiness in his writing, and,
Yeah. So do you think that, again, we talk about how everything doesn't mean something, but... Do you think there's some significance to the you're too old or something, how Peter and Susan can never come back, or do you think it was just kind of a way that like Lewis didn't want the books, didn't know if he wanted like I don't know, do you think it was just a practical thing?
I honestly don't know what he's doing there.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, especially considering the first time they were in Narnia, they lived there and grew up into adulthood there, so I don't really know what he was... That's one of those things where I have written enough poetry and have had enough friends write poetry that I know this about poems. You're never going to understand everything the writer is going for. That's part of the beauty of it. Part of the beauty of it is you can interpret a poem one way and I can another way. I can read something into what they're saying.
I don't interpret poems. I don't like
I know.
Poems.
Most people don't like poetry, but because it's too confusing or whatever. But I've read enough of people's poetry that I actually know to be able to say, what does this mean? What are you referring to here? And how enlightening that is. And if C.S. Lewis was here, it would be so nice to sit down and say, did you have something specifically in mind with that? Or is that just a device to like keep the books rolling and fresh and introduce new characters and keep exploring different things? Or did it mean something specific?
Yeah, maybe we'll be able to ask him when we get to heaven or something like that.
That would be cool. Because,
well,
sometimes a person, Gerard Manley Hopkins, really confusing poet from England in the 1800s, he wrote a lot of like notes on his poetry, which sometimes explained what he was talking about. Unfortunately, we don't have the annotated, side notes of C.S. Lewis. Well, here's what I was really thinking with this. That would be cool, but he leaves it up to us, and that's valuable too.
Maybe that's what he wants to do too.
To determine, does this mean something or not?
And he does kind of expound on in the next book where he's like, you have to get close to your own world now, and you were just, who knows, maybe this is what it is. He wants them to get to know the real, who he is in our world, and because they're just brought there just to be introduced to this idea of a savior, and then to actually get to know the real Jesus, get to know the real Jesus.
There's a quality of faith there, like in life, God doesn't show up in massively demonstrative ways all the time. Why? Because he wants us to live by faith, not by sight. If you're constantly seeing him, seeing the actual byproduct of his work, actually walking with him, like they do in Narnia, there's a quality of faith and trust that you lose because he's so evident. The disciples, I'm sure, when Jesus left, had to learn to walk by faith and not by sight in a very unique way. Like, we know this guy is real, but now he's left us and the Holy Spirit's with us, but we have to learn how to walk in that. In the same way that maybe that's what Lewis was going for, Peter and Susan, and eventually the other two, we're going to have to learn to walk on their own 2 feet and not have the constant arm right there, So.
And I mean, I did hear, Douglas Gresham said that he actually thought about, that Lewis actually thought about ending Narnia after the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So maybe he didn't intend to have, I think maybe his intention was a little bit of it being the Pevensies story or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe he just didn't, he wanted to talk about growing up. I don't know.
Ended there, and then he wrote 4 more books.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy.
Well, he thought they might be the last, but he wasn't sure or something like that. And then maybe he wanted to tie up loose ends book by book or something, so that if he didn't write more, then it wouldn't be what happened here, what happened here, what happened, whatever. Because that is one thing I detest about TV shows or something that don't tie up the loose ends very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I probably need to quit here, but one theme I would like to talk about in another session is the idea of C.S. Lewis being so beloved by the Christian community anyway today, but how he was basically not very well accepted by his own peers in his own, in Oxford anyway.
That kind of surprises me.
Yeah, and how that I think is worth exploring a bit in another session. But yeah. So good stuff.
Yep.
Starbucks.